She forged my signature, poisoned my wine, and turned my daughter against me. But when the cuffs snapped shut on her wrists, I finally breathed like a free man. 40 years of marriage should feel like triumph, but my hands trembled as I watched my wife's manicured fingers slide along the rim of my wine glass. She thought I wasn't looking. She thought no one was. But I've spent my life as a civil engineer, a man who notices details others miss. A crack in concrete, a seam in steel, the slightest misalignment that could bring an entire structure down if ignored. Tonight I saw that same kind of flaw in the woman I'd built my life with. Only hours earlier I'd been convincing myself that this anniversary dinner would be a chance to reset, to breathe life into something that had been suffocating under her arrogance for years. Yet here I sat in the soft glow of Westport's most expensive restaurant, watching the woman I'd promised forever to tamper with my drink. I remembered last week when she laughed at me in front of her friends. "Daniel's getting forgetful," Victoria had said, her voice sweet like honey laced with venom. "He misplaced the car keys 3 times this month. Poor man's finally slowing down." The table had erupted in polite laughter while I smiled through it. But I'd felt the sting. It was not forgetfulness. It was exhaustion. 40 years of being belittled, undermined, and slowly erased. And now, I feared it was something far worse. The restaurant's chandeliers scattered gold across the mahogany table, but that light felt cruel, exposing truths I had no desire to face. Across from me, our daughter Sarah was laughing at something her husband James had said. Her laughter rang bright and innocent, though she didn't see the storm raging just feet away. Next to her sat Clara Hale, Victoria's younger sister, dressed to impress as always, with a diamond necklace that I knew she hadn't bought on her own. She'd been Victoria's shadow for years, feeding her ego, enabling her schemes. And then there was Ethan Cross. Tall, tanned, with the slick charm of a man who'd spent his life working rooms instead of jobs. Officially, he was just a family friend, someone who'd invested in a mutual acquaintance's business. But the way Victoria's eyes lingered on him, the way his smile stretched too wide at her jokes, it told a story I'd been trying not to read. I shifted in my chair, feeling the weight of Samuel Whitaker's gaze. My father-in-law had always been a man of quiet authority, a retired judge whose silence spoke louder than most people's words. His eyes met mine, steady, knowing. In that moment, I wasn't sure whether it was comfort or confirmation I saw there. The waiter refilled our glasses with the deep red of a Napa Valley vintage. Victoria had insisted on this wine, claiming it was special, just for us. I kept my eyes fixed on her as her manicured finger brushed the rim of my glass. Subtle, practiced, but I saw it. I knew what I saw. The conversation at the table carried on without me. Sarah's laughter, James's anecdotes, the polite chuckles of neighbors who'd joined us, all of it felt distant. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat echoing like footsteps in a narrowing hallway. I forced myself to breathe evenly, to smile as though nothing were wrong. Decades of client presentations, city council pitches, and courtroom testimony had trained me in composure. But inside, my world was collapsing. I thought of our wedding day, of Victoria in white, glowing with promise. I thought of the house we'd built together, the blueprints I'd drawn and the colors she'd chosen. I thought of Sarah's birth, the nights we'd stayed up rocking her back to sleep. Every memory that had once been a foundation now cracked and crumbled beneath the weight of suspicion. My hand, hidden beneath the tablecloth, trembled around the napkin. Slowly, deliberately, I let it slip from my lap. I bent down, steadying myself against the chair leg as though retrieving it. My fingers reached for the stem of my glass, the one Victoria had touched. With a silent, practiced movement, I switched it with the glass sitting just inches away, James's. The precision felt like muscle memory, no different than aligning steel beams or correcting a flawed design. Exact, unnoticeable, necessary. When I rose back into my seat, I did not reach for the wine. Instead, I lifted the water glass before me, clinking it gently against Victoria's raised glass as she smiled. "To 40 more years," she said, her voice carrying across the table. "To 40 more," I echoed, forcing a smile that felt foreign on my lips. Her eyes narrowed for just a flicker, a shadow of confusion crossing her face when she noticed I hadn't touched the wine. But the smile returned quickly, smooth and practiced. Too practiced. The piano in the corner struck up a familiar melody. Our wedding song, reinterpreted into something elegant. Once, that music would have stirred my heart. Tonight it felt like mockery. Discordant. Wrong. "You should try the wine, Daniel," Victoria said sweetly, her gaze fixed on me. "I selected it specially for you." I nodded, pretending absent-mindedness, pretending compliance, watching instead as James took a sip from the glass I had switched. My eyes darted to Samuel again. He hadn't touched his drink. His gaze never left Victoria's face. A flicker of something passed between us, silent acknowledgement that whatever was happening, we both knew the stakes. The plates arrived, servers moving with quiet efficiency. Garlic and butter filled the air, rich scents that suddenly turned cloying. My stomach churned. Then it happened. Clara's fork clattered against her plate. Her hand shot to her throat, her eyes widening in shock. The sound of her chair scraping back sliced through the chatter. She gasped once, twice, then choked. "Clara?" Victoria's voice rang sharp, pitched higher than usual. Genuine shock, or the surprise of the wrong victim? The table erupted into chaos. James leapt to his feet, training from medical school kicking in. Sarah's voice trembled as she called for help. Napkins stained crimson as wine spilled across the white linen tablecloth, spreading like evidence across a crime scene. "She must be having an allergic reaction," Victoria exclaimed, her hands fluttering uselessly, eyes darting too quickly between Clara and me. Servers rushed forward. Someone shouted for an ambulance. Guests pushed back from the table, chairs toppling in the panic. I sat frozen, the world around me spinning in frantic motion. I watched Victoria's face. Every twitch, every calculated gesture. There it was, the flicker of recognition, the momentary crack in her facade when she realized Clara had taken the drink meant for me. And I knew. I knew with a clarity that burned through every layer of denial I'd built over 40 years. She had wanted me to die tonight. The rest blurred, the paramedics arriving, lifting Clara onto a stretcher, Sarah sobbing against James's shoulder. Victoria climbing into the ambulance, phone already pressed to her ear, the picture of a concerned sister. But my eyes weren't on her. They were fixed on Samuel. The old man's gaze locked on mine across the chaos. He gave the smallest of nods, almost imperceptible, but enough. Permission. Confirmation. As I rose from the table, murmuring about getting the car, no one stopped me. No one noticed as I backed toward the restaurant doors, my reflection splintered in the mirrors that lined the exit. A man I no longer recognized stared back at me. When the night air hit my face, it was like a blow, sharp and cold. My hands shook violently as I fumbled with my keys, the weight of an anniversary gift for Victoria, an expensive gold watch, burning in my pocket like a cruel joke. 40 years of marriage should have felt like triumph. Instead, it felt like execution delayed. As I slid behind the wheel, sirens wailing in the distance, the truth pressed down on me with suffocating force. As the sirens wailed closer, I realized with icy clarity, my wife of 40 years had just tried to kill me. Daniel drives aimlessly through suburban streets, his wedding ring burning against his skin like a shackle. The road blurred beneath my headlights, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. Every turn of the wheel felt mechanical, as though my body was steering out of habit while my mind drifted somewhere else entirely. The streets of Westport were familiar. I'd driven these same winding suburban roads for decades, but tonight they looked foreign, dangerous, like a dream slipping into nightmare. My wedding ring pressed into my finger, tighter than it had ever felt. The gold band had once been a promise. Tonight, it was a prison. The memory of the restaurant clung to me like smoke. Clara's fork clattering against porcelain, the way her eyes bulged with confusion, her desperate gasps for air. Victoria's sharp cry, not quite panic, not quite relief. And Samuel's gaze across the chaos, the unspoken nod that confirmed what I'd been trying to deny for months, maybe years. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. My whole body was trembling, yet my mind replayed every detail with brutal clarity. Her manicured hand brushing the rim of my glass, the way she watched me when she thought no one else was looking, the way she feigned surprise when Clara collapsed. Victoria, my wife, the woman I had devoted 40 years to, the woman who had just tried to poison me. The thought was unbearable, yet undeniable. I slowed at a red light, staring at the familiar corner of Main and Elm. On one side, the florist where I had once bought her roses after a fight. On the other, the hardware store where I picked up tools for endless house projects, the same home she had filled with laughter, dinners, and now, lies. How long had I been blind? A week ago, she had leaned over the kitchen island, her voice casual, as she suggested we review my life insurance. "It's just practical," she'd said, running a fingertip along the stem of her wineglass. "For Sarah's sake. If something ever happened to you." I'd signed the documents, thinking nothing of it, because that's what a husband does. He trusts. Now, that memory felt like the tightening of a noose I hadn't noticed until too late. I passed houses glowing with warm lamplight, families gathered around dinner tables, teenagers sprawled on couches, faces lit by phone screens. Life went on in those homes, ordinary, safe, but not in mine. When the weight of it all became too much, I pulled into the empty parking lot of St. Mark's Church. My tires crunched against the gravel. The steeple loomed above me, backlit by a sliver of moonlight. I killed the engine, and for the first time that night, silence swallowed me whole. My chest heaved as sobs ripped through me. 40 years of trust crumbled in the darkness. I gripped the steering wheel until my hands ached, my forehead pressed against it, as though I could steady myself against the collapse of my world. Images flashed in my mind. Our wedding day, Victoria's veil blowing in the summer breeze, the house I had drawn plans for, every beam and foundation line etched into memory. Sarah's birth, when Victoria had squeezed my hand so tightly, I thought my bones would break. Were those moments real? Or were they just performances in her long con? The ring burned against my finger. Slowly, with trembling hands, I twisted it. The skin beneath was pale, indented from years of wear. For the first time in 4 decades, I slid it off. It sat heavy in my palm, a circle broken at last. I stared at it in the dim glow of the dashboard. My reflection warped in its curve. A stranger stared back at me. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, startling me. With numb fingers, I lifted it. A message glowed across the screen from an unknown number. "She's tried this before. Meet me at Riverside Park, north entrance. Come alone." My breath caught. Not her first attempt. The words hammered into me. My stomach turned violently as the implications settled in. How many times had I been close to this end without realizing it? The headaches I brushed off as stress. The meals she insisted she'd prepared with love. The times I'd woken dizzy, chalking it up to age or exhaustion. My thumb hovered over the screen. My first instinct was to call Sarah, to tell her everything. But then the memory of Victoria whispering to her over the phone, laughter following, stopped me cold. Had she already turned our daughter against me? The isolation hit me like a wave. I had no one. No proof beyond a wine glass I hadn't drunk from. No witnesses who saw her hand at the rim, only my word against hers. And Victoria had always been convincing. My eyes lifted to the church, its stained glass windows dark in the night. Years ago, we'd renewed our vows there for our 25th anniversary. I could still hear the words I'd spoken, my voice steady with conviction. For better or worse, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. It felt like a cruel joke now. The sobs subsided into a dull ache in my chest. The rain began to patter against the windshield, soft at first, then heavier. Each drop blurred the glass, smearing the light from the street lamps into streaks. I clutched the ring in my palm, pressing it into my skin until it hurt. A reminder that pain meant I was still alive. The message glowed again when I looked down. A stranger claiming she had tried this before. Should I trust it? Or was this another trap? The engineer in me, the man who built bridges and skyscrapers, who calculated every load and every risk, wanted facts. But the husband in me, broken and betrayed, wanted answers. I started the car again. The engine's rumble filled the silence. I pulled away from the church, tires slick on the rain-soaked pavement. As I turned down familiar streets, my headlights caught the neighborhood where Sarah lived. My foot hovered on the brake, tempted to stop, to knock on her door, to fall to my knees and beg her to believe me. But I knew better. If Victoria had poisoned her mind already, showing up unannounced would only feed the narrative of paranoia. So I kept driving, past the houses, past the lives untouched by poison. The dashboard clock glowed. 10:22 p.m. Less than 2 hours since the restaurant. 2 hours, and my life was unrecognizable. I tightened my grip on the wheel as I passed Riverside Park. The north entrance was dark, the sign half lit. My eyes lingered on the path that led into the trees. Shadows moved there, or maybe my mind invented them. I couldn't bring myself to stop. Not yet. Not when I didn't know who waited. Instead, I drove past, circling back toward Samuel Whitaker's street. My father-in-law's old craftsman bungalow came into view. The porch light glowed faintly, a beacon in the storm. But what froze me wasn't the light. It was the car parked in the driveway. Clara's car. The same one that should have been at the hospital, her body still hooked to IVs and monitors. My heart pounded. My instinct screamed to retreat, to turn the car around and vanish into the rain. But the front door opened. Samuel stood silhouetted in the doorway, his frame still upright despite his age. His hand lifted, palm out, beckoning me forward. I hesitated, breath catching in my throat. My wedding ring sat heavy in my pocket now, no longer on my finger. My life dangled between choices. Do I trust him? Or is this another step into the trap my wife had laid? The rain-slicked pavement gleamed in my headlights as I rolled slowly forward, unable to turn away. I wasn't just leaving a dinner. I was leaving a life built on lies. Samuel Whitaker opens his craftsman bungalow door before I can even knock, his eyes carrying the heavy knowledge of a man who has been waiting for this moment. The rain hadn't let up since I left the church. It streaked across the windshield in diagonal lines, the wipers struggling to keep pace. When I pulled into Samuel's driveway, the sight of Clara's sedan had nearly stopped my heart. I almost backed out, almost drove off into the night. But then Samuel appeared in the doorway, illuminated by the warm porch light. "Come in," he said, his voice low, urgent. I stepped out of the car, the cold rain soaking through my jacket in seconds. My shoes splashed against the slick pavement as I walked toward him. Every step felt weighted with uncertainty. Samuel's eyes darted to the street before he closed the door behind me. Inside, the familiar scent of pipe tobacco and lemon polish greeted me, instantly tugging me back through decades of memories. Countless holidays spent here, Sarah playing on this very rug, Victoria laughing in the kitchen. Now those memories felt staged, artificial, like props from a play whose script I had never been allowed to read. The living room was cluttered but comforting. Law books lined the shelves. Family photos crowded the mantel. Victoria as a child with pigtails, her mother's stern face beside her, her late mother-in-law's wedding portrait in black and white. I paused on the picture of our own wedding day, framed on the far side of the mantel. My younger self smiled proudly, arm draped around Victoria's waist, oblivious to the shadow of what she would become. "I saw what happened tonight," Samuel said quietly, his voice gravelly from age and smoke. "I've been waiting for her to make a move." I turned toward him, my throat tightening. You knew? Suspected, he corrected, adjusting his glasses. Not known. But I've watched her grow more like her mother with each passing year. And I feared this day might come. I sank into the armchair across from him, the leather creaking under my weight. My hands trembled as I clasped them together. She tried to kill me, Samuel. At our anniversary dinner, I switched the glasses. Clara, she's in the hospital now because of me. His expression didn't change. He moved slowly, deliberately, to a roll-top desk in the corner of the room. From around his neck, he drew a small brass key and unlocked the desk with a click. You're not crazy, Daniel, he said as he slid open the desk. And you're not alone. He pulled out a thick folder, its edges worn from years of handling, and laid it on the coffee table between us. Look at this, he said. I hesitated before opening the folder. Inside were documents, financial records, contracts, statements, all meticulously organized. My engineer's eye immediately caught the inconsistencies. The first document was a second mortgage on our house, dated 6 months ago. My signature was scrawled across the bottom. My stomach lurched. I never signed this, I whispered. I know, Samuel said simply. Next were credit card statements. Thousands of dollars spent on jewelry, hotel stays, cash withdrawals. I traced the purchases with my finger, each one a knife in my gut. I recognized none of them. She's been draining your accounts for years, Samuel said. Systematically, quietly, always just enough to explain away. I flipped to the next section, printed emails between Victoria and Ethan Cross. My chest tightened as I read the words. Not just romance, not just betrayal, but discussions about money, about my life insurance policy, about when the accident happens. $2 million, increased just last month. My vision swam. I pressed my palms into my eyes, fighting against the wave of nausea. She planned everything, every detail. Samuel's voice was steady, controlled. Do you remember her mother's first husband? I nodded vaguely. Died of a heart attack. There was an investigation, Samuel said, his tone grim. Nothing was ever proven, but I was young then, too trusting. Now I see the pattern. I looked at him, horror blooming in my chest. You think Victoria... I don't think, he interrupted. I know. Her mother orchestrated it. And Victoria learned from the best. I staggered to my feet, pacing the room. My hand brushed against the photo of our wedding day on the mantel. I couldn't bear to look at it. I wanted to smash the glass, to tear it from the frame, but I couldn't move. She's been planning my death, I said, my voice cracking. Not just tonight. For months, maybe years. Samuel poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter and handed one to me. My hands shook as I accepted it. The amber liquid caught the lamplight, glowing with false warmth. There's more, Samuel said, his eyes fixed on mine. He pulled another document from the folder. It was a life insurance form, updated with Victoria as the sole beneficiary. My signature was forged at the bottom. I slammed the glass down on the table. Whiskey splashed across the papers. How is this possible? She's practiced, Samuel said quietly. And she's had help. Ethan Cross is no stranger to financial exploitation. I've tracked him for years. Women left destitute, men ruined. He never leaves evidence, until now. My chest heaved as I tried to absorb it all. Every moment of doubt, every time I'd questioned her loyalty, every insult she'd disguised as a joke, all of it converged here, in this room, in these papers. She texted me tonight, I whispered. Or someone did, after the restaurant. It said, she's tried this before. Samuel's expression darkened. 3 years ago, her business partner fell suddenly ill after threatening to expose her accounting irregularities. He survived, but barely, lost his memory, his career. Everyone believed it was natural. I didn't. My heart pounded. My mind raced through the timeline. Patterns emerged, ugly and undeniable. I had been nothing but a project to her, a means to an end. She's not just trying to kill me, I said. She's dismantling me, my reputation, my finances, my family. Samuel nodded slowly. That's her design, to leave you with nothing, to erase you before you're even gone. I stared at the ring in my pocket, its weight unbearable. She won't stop, Samuel. Not unless I stop her. His eyes met mine, filled with sorrow but also resolve. Then it's time you fought back. I lowered myself back into the chair, the documents spread out before me like evidence from a crime scene. The truth was laid bare, undeniable. I thought back to Thanksgiving, when Victoria had mocked Samuel, telling guests he still thought he was a judge. She had laughed, dismissing his wisdom. I had smiled weakly, unwilling to challenge her. Now I saw it differently. He had seen her for what she was long before I did. She always ridiculed me in front of others, I said, my voice hollow. Made me look weak, foolish, and I let her. She mistook patience for weakness, Samuel said. She forgot that a man who builds bridges can also burn them. Silence settled between us, heavy and suffocating. The grandfather clock ticked loudly in the corner, each chime a reminder that time was running out. She has Sarah, I whispered. She's already poisoned her mind against me. Samuel leaned forward, his eyes sharp. Then you show her the truth. But you need more proof, Daniel. You need her to reveal herself. I nodded, my mind already spinning. Clara, I said. She drank the wine. She knows. If I can get her to talk. Be careful, Samuel warned. They've always been in this together. Sisters bound by greed. But if Clara believes you already know, she might slip. I looked down at the documents once more, the damning evidence of a life built on lies. The whiskey glass was still in my hand, but I hadn't touched it. I thought of Victoria's smile at the restaurant, how it hadn't reached her eyes. I thought of Clara collapsing. I thought of Ethan's smug grin. 40 years. 40 years of sacrifice, loyalty, and patience, all revealed to be weapons in her arsenal. My chest tightened with fury. For the first time since the dinner, I felt something stronger than despair. Resolve. I stood, tucking the documents under my arm. Samuel's eyes followed me, filled with something like pride, something like grief. You'll need this, he said, pressing the brass key from his desk into my hand. The rest is in here. Use it wisely. I nodded, my jaw set. I'm done being her prey. I turned toward the door, the rain still hammering against the windows. My reflection in the glass was different now, harder, sharper. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't delusional. I was prey. And she'd been sharpening her knives for years. Jane's hospital room smells of antiseptic and roses. But it's her calculating smile that makes my stomach turn. The sterile white of the hospital walls felt like an assault after the storm outside. I moved down the corridor slowly, every squeak of my shoes against the linoleum echoing too loudly in my ears. My chest ached with each breath, and the steady beep of heart monitors from nearby rooms only deepened my unease. The bouquet of roses perched on the side table was the first thing I noticed when I entered Clara Hale's private room. Deep red, lush, and far too extravagant to be anything but Victoria's doing. My wife had always been careful to frame herself as thoughtful, loving, selfless, when in truth every gesture had strings attached. But it wasn't the roses that unsettled me. It was the look on Clara's face. She lay against crisp sheets, IV taped to her arm, oxygen tube across her nose. And yet, when her eyes found me, there was no weakness, no confusion, only calculation. "Michael," she said softly, then corrected herself with a faint smirk. "Daniel, shouldn't you be with Victoria? She's very upset." Her voice slid across the room like oil. I forced a smile, lowering myself into the visitor's chair. "I needed to check on you first," I said, my words carefully measured. "Quite a scare at dinner." "Just a reaction," she replied smoothly. "I'll be fine." Her eyes studied me as though weighing the cracks in my armor. How are you feeling? My thumb brushed the record button on my phone, hidden in my jacket pocket. The screen glowed faintly, capturing every word. My heart pounded so loudly I was afraid she could hear it. Me? I asked, feigning confusion. I'm not the one who collapsed. Her smile widened. No. You didn't touch your wine. The room seemed to contract around me. The antiseptic air turned sour. My instincts screamed that she knew I was bluffing, that she saw through every layer of my facade. But I leaned in anyway, playing my role. Clara, I said quietly, something strange is happening. Victoria's been acting differently. I found financial documents I never signed. I'm worried. For a heartbeat, her expression didn't change. Then her hand shot out, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. Her nails, painted a dark crimson, dug into my skin. What exactly did Samuel tell you? She demanded, her voice dropping the veneer of concern. Enough to know something's wrong, I answered carefully, resisting the urge to pull away. The silence between us stretched, thick with unspoken truths. Then Clara leaned back against her pillows, the grip loosening, a smile unfurling across her lips. Victoria said you might figure it out, she murmured, almost to herself. You were always too observant for your own good. Her words chilled me. You switched glasses, she continued casually, as though describing the weather. That was clever. Victoria underestimated you. I told her you couldn't be trusted to play the fool forever. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to keep my face neutral, my posture relaxed. Inside, I felt like I was hanging by a thread, every second threatening to expose me. You were supposed to be done tonight, Clara said, her tone light, conversational. The insurance policy. $2 million. Victoria promised me a quarter share. After everything she got in life, the house, the husband, the family, it was my turn, my reward. The words slammed into me with a force greater than any physical blow. My wife's betrayal had been enough, but hearing her sister's calm confession tore open another wound. How many times has she tried before? I asked, my voice low, steady, concealing the tremor of rage beneath. Clara tilted her head, eyes glittering. That business partner nearly ruined everything. Too suspicious, too quickly. But you, she smiled, a predator's smile. You were perfect. Anniversary dinner, family gathered. A man your age, collapsing of a heart attack? No one would have questioned it. Her voice dripped with pride, as if she admired the elegance of the plan. I struggled to maintain control, to keep my hands from shaking. My thumb pressed against the phone in my pocket, making sure it was still recording. This was it, the proof I needed. You manipulated Sarah, I said, forcing the words through clenched teeth. Did you know Victoria's filed for guardianship? She's been telling everyone I'm unstable, paranoid, that I'm losing my mind. Clara's smirk deepened. Of course. Sarah was always the contingency plan. If you somehow survived, Victoria made sure she'd believe you were unwell. Doctor's notes, memory lapses. She's been laying the groundwork for months. My stomach churned. Sarah. My daughter. My own flesh and blood, twisted against me. Before I could speak again, the door creaked open. A nurse entered, her sneakers squeaking across the tile. She checked the monitors, adjusted the IV. My pulse hammered in my ears as I casually slipped the phone deeper into my pocket. Everything looks fine here, the nurse said with a polite smile, oblivious to the storm raging in the room. She left as quickly as she came, the door closing with a soft click. I should go, I said, rising carefully, my voice even. Victoria will wonder where I am. Clara's eyes sharpened. She's looking for you, she said smoothly. I texted her, told her you were coming here. Her hand hovered near the call button. She'll be waiting outside. The words landed like a blow. My chest tightened, panic surging. I forced a smile, masking the dread. Tell her I'm heading home to rest, I said, backing toward the door. Clara's smile widened as I slipped out. her eyes following me like a hunter savoring the chase. I hurried down the hallway, my footsteps quickening. The service corridor offered a narrow escape, dimly lit and lined with supply carts. I ducked into it, heart pounding, narrowly avoiding a security guard who glanced my way. The elevator ride down felt endless. My legs buckled, my body sagging against the wall. The recording was safe in my pocket, but the weight of what I had heard pressed against me like a vice. When the doors opened, the parking garage greeted me with damp concrete and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. I stumbled out, finding a pillar to lean against, tears stinging my eyes. Everything was unraveling faster than I could grasp. An elderly janitor paused nearby, his mop dripping into a bucket. He frowned, concern etching his weathered face. "You all right, mister? Need medical help?" I shook my head quickly, unable to explain that my wounds weren't visible, that they weren't the kind a hospital could fix. My phone buzzed in my pocket. "Sarah," I answered with dread. "Dad," her voice came, strange, formal, rehearsed. "Mom told me what happened. I'm worried about you. These paranoid thoughts, the accusations." My breath caught. "Sarah, listen to me." She cut me off. "Mom says you've been acting erratically, forgetting things, accusing her of stealing. I've noticed it too. It's not your fault, Dad, but we need to address it before you hurt yourself or someone else." Her words were like knives, each one slicing deeper. Victoria's groundwork was paying off. "I filed for emergency guardianship," Sarah continued, her voice breaking slightly. "It's for your own good. The hearing is in 3 days." I closed my eyes. The parking garage spinning around me. My own daughter. My own flesh and blood. The call ended with me frozen in place, phone clutched in trembling hand. The final betrayal had come. Not just Victoria, not just Clara. Sarah. My legal autonomy. My freedom. My dignity. All of it was on the line. I shoved the phone back into my pocket, the recording pressing against me like a lifeline and a curse. I stumbled toward my car, the shadows of the garage stretching like claws. And that's when I saw it. A familiar sedan idling near the exit, its headlights off, engine humming softly. Watching. Waiting. The hunter and hunted roles were established, and for the first time in my life, I felt utterly, completely alone. The antiseptic glare of the hospital still lingers in my mind when my phone rings. My daughter Sarah's trembling voice telling me she's filed for emergency guardianship. Her words slammed into me harder than anything Victoria or Clara had done. The poison in the wine, the forged signatures, even Clara's smug confession in that hospital bed. None of it gutted me like hearing my daughter's voice, rehearsed and distant, telling me she thought I was losing my mind. "Dad?" she said again, her tone wavering as if she were trying to convince herself as much as me. "This isn't easy, but Mom's right. You're paranoid. You've been forgetting things. We need to get you help before you hurt yourself, or someone else." I sat in the driver's seat of my Ford Explorer in the dim parking garage, staring at the damp concrete walls, gripping the phone until my knuckles ached. The scent of gasoline and oil hung heavy in the air, but all I could smell was betrayal. "Sarah, listen to me," I pleaded, forcing my voice steady even as my chest burned. "Your mother is lying. I have proof." But she cut me off with a shaky sigh. "Dad, please, don't make this harder. The hearing is in 3 days. It's not punishment. It's to protect you. You'll see that once things calm down." The call ended, leaving me in suffocating silence. 3 days. That was all I had before Victoria stripped me of my autonomy completely. For a moment I sat frozen, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face looked pale, haggard, decades older than it had that morning. But behind the exhaustion, I saw something else. Resolve. I couldn't run from this. I couldn't curl up and wait for Victoria to bury me. I had to fight. I pulled out my phone again and dialed the number Samuel had given me earlier, a direct line to someone he trusted. Detective Rachel Morgan answered on the second ring, her voice brisk but curious. "Morgan." "This is Daniel Mercer," I said. "Samuel Whitaker told me to call you. I have evidence, recordings, documents, that prove my wife tried to poison me tonight, and now she's trying to have me declared incompetent." There was a pause, then more measured. "Where are you?" I gave her the cross streets near the hospital. Within 15 minutes, I was sitting in a cluttered office at the Westport precinct, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the faint scent of burnt coffee lingering in the air. Detective Morgan was a woman in her late 40s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that spoke of years on the job. Her desk was covered in neatly stacked files, though a scatter of post-it notes hinted at organized chaos. "So let me get this straight," she said, tapping a pen against her notepad. "You believe your wife of 40 years tried to poison you at your anniversary dinner, and now she's filed for guardianship claiming you're mentally incompetent?" I met her gaze without flinching. "I don't believe it. I know it, and I can prove it." From my jacket pocket I pulled the phone. "Listen to this." I handed it to her, watching as she placed the earbuds in her ears and pressed play. My stomach knotted as Clara's smooth, casual confession filled the silence of the office. Every word was a dagger, but this time it wasn't just carving me apart. It was exposing them. I watched the detective's face carefully. At first, she was skeptical, her brows furrowed in polite disbelief. Then her posture straightened, her eyes sharpened, and by the time the recording ended, her expression had hardened into focus. She removed the earbuds slowly. "Where did you get this?" "Hospital," I said. Clara believed I already knew everything. She admitted it freely. The poisoning, the life insurance, the manipulation of my daughter. It's all there. Detective Morgan leaned back, tapping her pen against the desk again, but now with a rhythm of thought rather than doubt. "All right, Mr. Mercer. Tell me everything from the beginning." So I did. I told her about the anniversary dinner, about the glass switch, about Clara's collapse. I told her about Samuel's documents, the forged mortgage, the financial drains, the insurance increase. I laid it all out, my voice growing steadier with each piece of evidence. When I finished, the office was silent except for the hum of the overhead lights. Morgan turned to her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Ethan Cross," she murmured, reading from the screen. 3 complaints of financial exploitation of elderly partners. All dropped. Victims refused to testify. "Or couldn't," I said grimly. She glanced at me, then pulled another file. "And Richard Thomas, your wife's former business partner. Illness 3 years ago. Toxicology showed traces of a high-end rodenticide. Undetectable unless you're specifically looking for it. He survived, but suffered memory loss. Case was closed." My stomach twisted. It fit too perfectly. 40 years on this job, Morgan said quietly. "And families still find new ways to destroy each other." I rubbed a hand over my face, the stubble rasping against my palm. "What do I do? In 3 days, she'll take everything. My freedom, my assets, my dignity. She's been planning this for months." Morgan leaned forward, her voice low but firm. "Then we stop her. But we'll need more than just Clara's recording. We'll need your daughter." "Sarah won't believe me," I said, bitterness in my throat. "Victoria's poisoned her mind for years." "Let me try," Morgan said. "Sometimes an official badge makes people listen differently." Within the hour, Sarah arrived at the station. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying, her expression wary. She barely looked at me, directing her words to Detective Morgan instead. "My father needs help," she began, her voice shaky but rehearsed. "He's been paranoid, forgetting things, accusing Mom of stealing. We can't let it go on. That's why I filed for guardianship." My heart ached hearing her say it, the conviction in her tone twisted from manipulation. "Sarah," Morgan interrupted gently, "I need you to listen to something first." She pressed play on the recording. I watched my daughter's face change as Clara's words spilled into the room. First confusion, then disbelief, then horror. When the recording ended, Sarah sat frozen, her hands trembling in her lap. Tears welled in her eyes. "Dad," she whispered, turning to me for the first time that night. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I swallowed hard, my throat burning. She told you I was paranoid, that I was forgetting things, but it was all part of her plan. She forged documents, manipulated the narrative. She's been laying the groundwork for years. Morgan slid the financial records across the desk. Your grandfather's been documenting it for a long time. These signatures? Forged. These purchases? Hidden. It's all there. Sarah's breath came in short gasps as she scanned the papers, recognition dawning in her eyes. The guardianship hearing, she stammered. I filed the papers yesterday. Can I withdraw them? We're already working on it, Morgan assured her. But there's more. Your mother's reported your father as potentially dangerous. We have limited time before she escalates further. As we strategized, my phone buzzed again. Victoria. The screen lit with her name for the 20th time that day. Morgan gave me a sharp nod. Answer it. Let her think you're coming home. We need to control the confrontation on our terms. I took a deep breath, pressing the phone to my ear. Victoria, I said, my voice steady. Daniel, she purred, her tone laced with concern. Where have you been? You scared Sarah half to death. Come home. We'll talk. I've made dinner. Yes, I replied evenly. I'm feeling better now. I'll be home this evening. When I hung up, Sarah reached across the table, placing her trembling hand over mine. Dad, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry. I should have seen through her manipulation. I squeezed her hand, my own eyes stinging. She fooled me for 40 years, Sarah. You never had a chance. For the first time since I saw Victoria's hand at the rim of my glass, hope stirred in my chest. My wife thought she had buried me. But she had no idea the fight I had left in me. My daughter's face crumbled as the truth shattered her world, just as it had mine days before. Victoria gathers family and neighbors in the Mercer living room, ready to put on her greatest performance. The dutiful wife confronting her paranoid husband. The living room I had designed with my own hands felt unrecognizable when I walked into it that evening. The cream-colored walls, the oak floors I had refinished, the leather armchair that had molded to my frame over decades, all of it had been transformed into a stage where my wife was ready to deliver the performance of a lifetime. The smell of hors d'oeuvres drifted from the kitchen. Shrimp cocktail, cubes of cheddar and Gouda, crackers arranged in perfect symmetry. The kind of food Victoria always served when she wanted to impress. Wine glasses sparkled on the coffee table, waiting to be filled. The neighbors were there, people we had known for years, sitting stiffly with polite smiles. James, Sarah's husband, stood near the fireplace, his hands in his pockets, his eyes darting between me and Victoria. And at the center of it all, Victoria herself. She wore a string of pearls, understated makeup, her hair pulled back in a style that suggested sleepless nights of worry. She had even chosen a dress a shade more muted than her usual vibrant colors. Every detail of her appearance screamed concerned wife. Michael, she said warmly, though the warmth was an act, her arms opening as if for an embrace. We've all been so worried about you. I stopped just inside the doorway, letting my eyes sweep across the room. Samuel sat near the window, his posture straight, his face unreadable. Sarah was perched on the edge of the sofa, tension etched in every line of her body. And beside her, Clara's empty chair sat conspicuously vacant. Everyone was here, everyone she needed to witness what she believed would be my downfall. Victoria gestured around the room, her voice carrying just the right amount of tremble. Everyone's here because we care about you. These episodes of paranoia, the accusations, the erratic behavior, it's not your fault, but you need help. I let her words hang in the air, nodding slowly, my expression neutral. Inside, my heart pounded with anticipation. This was the trap she had set for me, but she didn't know I had come armed with a trap of my own. She turned to the gathered group, speaking about me as though I weren't there. Michael believes I'm trying to harm him. He thinks I poisoned him at our anniversary dinner." Her voice caught perfectly, the way an actress might catch it on cue. "He even switched wine glasses with my sister, which is why she had an allergic reaction. Now he's been hiding, refusing to come home." Murmurs rippled through the room. One neighbor shook his head sympathetically. Another whispered something to his wife. Victoria's performance was flawless. I lowered myself into the leather armchair, my armchair, letting the familiar creak ground me. I met her eyes evenly. "I don't understand what's happening," I said, deliberately letting my voice falter. Her face softened with feigned compassion. She stepped closer, placing a hand on my shoulder. "That's why we're here, darling. The guardianship hearing tomorrow will help us get you the care you need. You won't have to worry about a thing. I'll handle everything, the house, the finances, your medical decisions, all of it." Her touch burned against my skin, but I held her gaze, allowing just enough uncertainty in my expression to convince her she had won. She straightened, turning back to the room. "You see? He's confused. He doesn't know what's happening." I let the silence linger for a moment longer. Then I rose slowly to my feet. "Before we continue," I said, my voice stronger now, echoing off the walls of the room I had built with my own hands, "I'd like everyone to hear something." From my pocket, I pulled my phone. My thumb tapped the screen, and suddenly the living room was filled with Clara's voice. Her confession spilled into the air, smooth, casual, devastating. The poisoning, the life insurance, the manipulation of Sarah. Every word recorded in that antiseptic hospital room now played out in my home, in front of neighbors, family, friends. The room fell silent. Utterly, completely silent. Victoria's smile froze, faltered. Her mask cracked just slightly, but enough. I saw the flash of panic in her eyes before she recovered. Jane was confused, she insisted quickly, her voice high, brittle. She was on medication. She didn't know what she was saying. But the words had already sunk in. The neighbors exchanged shocked glances. James shifted uncomfortably, his face pale. Sarah's hands trembled in her lap. I stepped closer to my wife, my voice steady, deliberate. "For 40 years you've ridiculed me, mocked me, lied to me, and I endured it all because I believed in us. But tonight, Victoria, you don't get to control the story anymore." Her lips parted, her breath quickened. For the first time I saw not the polished actress, not the charming wife, but the cracks beneath. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words stuck in her throat. The room was no longer hers. She'd summoned an audience for my downfall, but they were about to witness hers. Victoria's hand tightens around a wine glass until it shatters, red staining the white carpet like blood as her perfect facade collapses. The sound of glass splintering was sharp, violent, so different from the careful, polished tone she had used only moments earlier. I watched red wine spill across the white carpet she had once protected obsessively, each droplet blooming like bloodstains. The shards glittered in the lamplight, a reflection of her unraveling. Victoria froze, her hand trembling as she stared at the mess, then at me. For decades, she had kept control of every detail, our home, our finances, even my dignity. And now, with the glass broken at her feet, the control slipped from her fingers too. "See how paranoid he is?" She spat suddenly, spinning toward the neighbors. "This is exactly what I've been telling you. He's manipulating you just like he's manipulated everything else." But her words sounded thin, desperate. No longer the carefully measured tones of a woman in command. Now the frantic shrillness of someone cornered. I reached into the folder Samuel had pressed into my hands the night before. The documents were worn, but damning. With deliberate precision, I laid them one by one on the coffee table. "Here's the second mortgage you forged with my signature." My voice was calm, colder than I had ever heard it. "Here are the credit card statements for hotels and jewelry I never saw. And here," I paused, letting my gaze slice through her, "are the emails between you and Ethan Cross. planning how to use my life insurance policy once I was dead. Gasps filled the room. One of our neighbors covered her mouth with her hand. Another whispered, "My God." Victoria's face contorted, a storm of emotions flickering across her features: shock, anger, fear. She tried to smile, but the mask cracked further. "All of it fake," she insisted. "He's been tampering with my accounts for years, creating this fantasy." But no one nodded. No one believed her anymore. I stepped closer, holding up one more page, the updated life insurance policy. $2 million, increased just last month, with your name as the sole beneficiary, forged with my signature. Her eyes darted, searching the faces in the room for allies. She found none. Even James, who had always been so reserved, shook his head slowly, betrayal written across his face. "You were never supposed to be smart enough to notice," she hissed suddenly, her voice dripping venom. "Always obsessing over details, checking everything twice. You made it so difficult." The words weren't meant for the audience. They were meant for me. And in that moment, her mask fell away completely. "Mom," Sarah whispered from the sofa, tears streaming down her cheeks. "How could you?" Victoria's gaze snapped to her daughter, and for the first time, her voice turned cruel. "You think your marriage was real, Sarah? I selected James for his medical access. You were just another tool in my plan." James's face went pale. He stood abruptly, his hands trembling. The room rippled with shocked murmurs. Victoria's hand gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. "This proves nothing," she screamed. Jane was confused. "These documents are fake. Michael manipulated all of you." The front door opened. Detective Rachel Morgan stepped inside, 2 uniformed officers flanking her. Her badge glinted under the light. "Victoria Mercer," she said firmly, her voice steady and professional. "We have some questions regarding the attempted murder of your husband, Daniel Mercer." The room stilled. Every eye turned to Victoria. Her gaze darted toward the back door. I saw the calculation flash across her face. She moved suddenly, lunging toward the exit, skirts swishing around her legs. But Samuel was already there. My father-in-law, frail with age yet steady with resolve, stepped into her path. She collided with him, her hands pushing against his chest, but he didn't move. "I tried to tell you years ago," Samuel said softly, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Character is fate, Victoria." She froze, staring at him, the truth of his words burning through her fury. The officers closed in. One reached for her wrist, twisting it behind her back. The other snapped the cuffs shut with a metallic click. For 40 years, I had watched her command every room, charm every audience, dictate every story. But tonight, as she stood in handcuffs, her hair falling from its carefully arranged style, her pearls broken and scattered across the floor, I saw her clearly for the first time. She turned her head, her eyes finding mine. No love there, no regret, only cold fury. "You would have never known," she whispered, her voice low but cutting. "It would have been peaceful, just like falling asleep." The officers led her toward the door, her heels clicking against the hardwood. The sound faded, and then the house was silent, except for Sarah's quiet sobs and the ticking of the grandfather clock. I stood rooted in place, staring at the shattered glass, the spilled wine, the scattered pearls. My entire marriage lay there in pieces, exposed to everyone, undeniable. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely, utterly free. As the cuffs snapped shut, she glared at me with eyes that promised death. Yet for the first time, I felt completely alive. The courthouse bench was cold beneath me as I watched Victoria, once my wife of 40 years, sit in a beige jumpsuit with her hands shackled. No pearls, no perfect makeup, no performance left to give. 3 weeks had passed since the night of the intervention. The surreal quality of it all hadn't yet worn off. I had lived with her so long, eaten meals across from her, shared a bed with her, built a life with her, that seeing her in chains felt like watching a stranger wear her face. The judge denied bail, citing her as a flight risk and noting the calculated nature of the crimes. Clara sat beside her, eyes downcast. No trace of the smug smile she wore in that hospital bed. For once, both sisters looked small, powerless, cornered. Victoria never looked at me. Not once during the entire proceeding. When the gavel came down, echoing like a hammer on steel, I felt no triumph, no celebration. Only necessity. Justice doesn't feel like victory, it feels like survival. Outside, the courthouse steps stretched before me. Reporters gathered, cameras flashing, their voices calling my name. I ignored them all. Samuel was waiting at the bottom, leaning heavily on his cane. His eyes met mine, heavy with pain, but also with something steadier. Vindication. Justice doesn't feel like victory, does it? He said softly. No, I replied, my voice low. Just necessity. The following day, I signed papers selling the family home. Walking through those empty rooms was harder than I expected. The dining room where we'd hosted Thanksgivings, the kitchen where Sarah once stood on a stool to help me flip pancakes, the living room where Victoria had staged her last performance. Each space carried a memory, but the memories weren't mine anymore. They were hers, stained by lies. I packed only what mattered: my architectural awards, framed photographs of Sarah and the grandchildren, the handcrafted chess set my father had made me. The rest, the furniture, the clothes, even the rug Victoria had once bragged about buying in Paris, I left behind. They felt tainted, like relics from a life that hadn't been real. Sarah came to help me. She carried boxes carefully, her face drawn but determined. You could stay with us until you find something larger, she offered as she placed a box of books into my car. I'm sure, I said, forcing a smile. The one-bedroom apartment I'd rented near the park wasn't much, but it was mine. A space untouched by deception. Samuel surprised me with how much he showed up in those weeks. For years, he had been a quiet figure in the background, tolerated but mocked by Victoria. Now, he became an anchor. We played chess on his porch, the autumn air crisp and clean. He shared stories of his late wife, his regrets, his mistakes, and I shared mine. She was always her mother's daughter, he said one evening, moving a pawn forward with shaky fingers. I just didn't want to see it until it was too late. The truth in his words stung, but they also gave me peace. Some burdens weren't mine alone to carry. One morning, Detective Rachel Morgan stopped by my apartment. She looked less like a detective that day, more like a friend, her blazer casual, her expression softer. Another of Victoria's victims has come forward, she told me. A man who recognized Ethan Cross from the news. He said seeing you stand up gave him the courage to speak. Her words hit me harder than I expected. That my suffering, my fight, could somehow help someone else. That was something I hadn't thought possible. The senior center director called me the following week. Word had spread, and they asked if I'd be willing to give a talk about financial exploitation, about how manipulation often hides behind love. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't a speaker. I was an architect. I built bridges, not speeches. But something in me shifted. I realized I could build a different kind of bridge now, a bridge between my pain and someone else's survival. The first night I stood in that senior center, the folding chairs filled with faces older than mine, I felt a strange calm. I spoke plainly, not as a victim, but as a man who had learned too late how fragile trust can be. I never imagined retirement would look like this, I admitted. But purpose finds us in unexpected places. Afterward, people approached me. Some shared their stories about scams, betrayals, loved ones who had turned cruel. Others simply squeezed my hand and thanked me. Among them was a widow named Catherine, her eyes sharp and kind. She lingered longer than most, her words simple. Most people wouldn't share something so personal to help strangers. Her smile stayed with me long after she left. Back at my apartment, the wedding ring sat in a wooden box on the shelf. I hadn't thrown it away. I hadn't put it back on. It was no longer a shackle, but neither was it a symbol of hope. It was a reminder, a lesson, a piece of a past that no longer defined me. Some evenings I sat on the small balcony overlooking the park, the city skyline glowing in the distance. I sketched again, designs for a community housing project I'd once dreamed about, but shelved for Victoria's vacations, her whims. Now I drew freely. My pen traced lines not for her approval, but for my own vision. The grandchildren visited one Saturday, Sarah bringing them to see my new place. They ran through the small apartment, laughing, their voices bouncing off the walls. They didn't see it as small or empty. To them it was new, fresh, filled with possibility. As I watched them, I felt something stir. Hope. Walter's words from that night came back to me. Character is fate. For decades, Victoria's fate had been hidden behind pearls and polished lies. But mine was still being written. And for the first time in months, I smiled. A real smile. I had been underestimated, mocked, betrayed. But I had survived. And I wasn't done yet. I leaned back on the balcony chair, lifting my coffee cup toward the night sky. The park stretched below, alive with movement. Joggers, dogs, children playing even as the sun dipped low. The world hadn't ended. It had just begun again, in a different form. As I sipped, I thought about everything I'd endured. The wine glass at the restaurant, Clara gasping for breath, Sarah's tearful betrayal, Victoria's cold eyes as the cuffs closed around her wrists. Each moment had nearly broken me, but each moment had also reshaped me. 40 years were gone. But what remained, self-respect, truth, dignity, was unshakable. If you were me, standing on that balcony after 40 years of betrayal, what would you want to say? I'd truly like to hear your thoughts. Your words might be the very ones that give strength to someone else who feels underestimated tonight.